see some smiling faces anyway. Can you just give me a moment, please? I just need to... Thank you. I'm sorry to keep you a few minutes this morning. There have been a few administrative matters to deal with. And can I bring you up to date with where we are? On Wednesday, I had scheduled a start for 10:30, I think. Whether it was 10 or 10:30, it's now going to be 11 o'clock on Wednesday, please. I think Mr. Ramadar is going to be the first to address us at the conclusion. I see he's not here at the moment, but we will not start on Wednesday until 11 o'clock. All right? I don't think that will affect our timetable otherwise, but just to tell everyone that's the position. Next is this, we received a statement from Dr. Glenn Cheddy, a diving or commercial diving expert, on Friday. It was posted on the website at 4 o'clock on Friday afternoon. I didn't actually read it until this morning. Others have read it over the weekend. It is clear to me that this is a witness who ought to give evidence. The witness has been supplied to us by Miss Enquiry Alfonso on behalf of her clients. As I say, somewhat late in the day, if I may say so. I'm reluctant to delay these proceedings beyond that. I don't know whether everyone has had a chance to see it or not. Mr. Peterson, have you had an opportunity to see this?
I didn't have an opportunity to see it, sir. I mean, I was on the website, but I didn't see it.
I'm not surprised. I wouldn't have been looking at the website myself.
Yeah, I wouldn't for that, yeah. So I was looking at, working mainly with soft copies. But I got the impression from Ms. Alfonso last week that that was just somebody that she was assisting on the side, so to speak. I didn't realize it was her, a witness that she was putting forward. But I would look and see what he has to say, so once it's relevant.
I think you should. At the moment, I have him scheduled to give evidence this afternoon. I would entertain and hear any application that should not happen. But if you could, as best you're able, either through one of your assistants or some other method, get an overview as to whether or not you feel able to deal with any issues that arise from his statement. I can tell you that my reading of it, within having gone halfway through it, there was no doubt in my mind that he should give live evidence to give everyone an opportunity to ask him questions if they wish to do so.
We'll look at it, sir.
What's your position, Ms. Prasad Maharaj?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. In fact, I have now seen this this statement this morning. In fact, I just started reading it before, before we started, so I'm not sure. I've only reached page 6 of it, so yes. I know that there is relevant aspects, but I'm not sure. Can I ask?
I mean, as I say, I have him scheduled for this afternoon. Miss Enquiry Alfonso has been in touch with him and has told us that he is available this afternoon to give his evidence. But, as I say, whilst that is obviously ideal from our point of view, it may not be from counsel's point of view. And if you needed more time, I would entertain such an application. But for the moment, he's scheduled for 2 o'clock. I mean, there's two of you. Perhaps your assistant can... is it Mr. Gavin Nareen Rampasad? Is that you, sir? Yes. Yeah, right. But I don't know if he might read it whilst we're conducting proceedings this morning.
Certainly.
To give you a view.
I simply don't have an appreciation of what the content is, though, so that I can tell you if I require any time at this point in time. But, yeah, certainly Mr. Paul can read that.
Thank you. Can I address everybody who's going to be addressing the Commission from Wednesday onwards this week in any concluding remarks, we would welcome suggestions dealing with the recommendations that we are asked to make as to the future of the industry, so that in the submissions that you might make to us in the course of the remainder of this week, we would be grateful to receive any suggestions that there might be which would assist in ameliorating the kind of incident that happened with which this inquiry is involved. So, for example, the union might wish to consider minimum standards. There may be some consideration given to communication by those representing the families. OSHA, I understand, are going to be providing us with their suggestions by Wednesday at lunchtime. Is that right? By Wednesday lunchtime. That sort of thing would be helpful from anybody who are addressing the Commission. So I ask you to give that some thought, perhaps, before you address us. Lastly, this. We had arranged for the families to be given an opportunity to address this Commission originally yesterday, for tomorrow. I brought that forward to today. I understand there may be some concerns about that, and if there are, Mr. Peterson, you'll no doubt make such application as you think appropriate. Can I just say this, that this inquiry is involved in trying to find out why 4 people died and what happened once they were sucked into this pipe. We are very mindful of the fact that there are families left behind who are obviously directly interested in the outcome of this inquiry. It would be wrong, in our view, as presently formed, and obviously subject to any other application that may be made, but as presently formed, it would be wrong to stifle any of them from saying what they want to say within the confines of what I have described. I am not prepared to allow some rant pointing the finger at specific individuals or anything of that kind. On the other hand, the fact that they have been deeply affected by this is something which this Commission feels is appropriate for them to be able to voice themselves rather than just on a piece of paper, which gets lost in the mire of the tens of thousands of pages that have been supplied to this Commission. I have also indicated that I will not permit cross-examination of any of those persons who wish to give their evidence live. Their evidence will be by virtue of reading that which has been supplied. It is not intended to give free rein to anybody beyond that which they have set out in their statements. So that is our preliminary view. Anybody who has an objection to that course will no doubt express it. But for the moment, they are scheduled to give evidence this afternoon, and that is what I plan to permit to happen. All right, that's where we are today. I think our first witness for today...
Mr. Chairman, yes, you're correct. I did, as the tradition of the profession requires, I did alert counsel to the Commission that we wish to take an objection to the family members giving evidence, and don't know if it's now is the appropriate time at your invitation or whether just before, but I think if I were able to persuade you to change your mind, then it will save some inconvenience of travel. The ground of my objection is grounded in really relevance. I did consume part of my weekend perusing and scrubbing and perusing the terms of reference. And the fault may be mine, but I was unable to discover the relevance of that testimony within the strictures of the terms of reference as set up by this Commission.
Right, just before you go, so that I'm clear about the application being made, the application is an objection to the evidence at all?
Yes, it's an objection to the evidence.
So all of the statements written by those who are the families of the victims should be removed from the Commission altogether.
Yes, sir.
Is that the application?
Yes, sir. I could find no relevance with respect to assisting this Commission with respect to what caused the incident or the management of it right after. I can't find any probative value in that evidence with respect to the terms of reference of this Commission. I am not unmindful of what the families may have experienced, and I'm sure there will be adequate fora for them to indicate their feelings and the impact of it on them. But with respect to the strictures of the terms of reference of this Commission, I find difficulty placing that evidence in the terms of reference. My submission is that it's irrelevant and it's of no probative value to assist this Commission in its work, but the only thing I could find in it may be prejudicial effect against my respectful clients, and I say this with the greatest deference to you, Mr. Chairman. Anything else?
Again, so that I'm clear about it, that which we have already been provided with and has been available on the website for now some time should be removed, and your invitation is that the Commission should ignore that which is set out in those statements.
Yes, it was submitted, so one couldn't prevent it being submitted, but with respect to the terms of reference of this Commission, my respectful submission is that it not be taken into account in the discharge of the terms of reference of this Commission.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to align themselves with that application? I see Mr. Ramadar, who does represent some of the families, and his assistant is not here. Is there anybody from Mr. Ramadar's team present?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I know Mr. Ramadar is.
Sorry, remind me who you are. I can't see you actually.
I'm Niara Budan. I act along with Mr. Ramadar. Mr. Ramadar is on his way. He should be here within the next 5 minutes if the chairman is minded to allow some time for him to arrive.
Why is he late?
Can't see, Mr. Chairman.
All right, well, I won't make a decision as yet. I'll wait to hear if he has anything to add.
Yes.
We'll take an appropriate moment to hear that. In any event, I want to give it some consideration. I've already indicated our preliminary view, and I will consider whether or not what Mr. Peterson has said. Yes, thank you. I will consider what Mr. Peterson has said and make a decision. Even if I don't give reasons immediately, I will certainly make a decision by the return from our break this morning, so that everybody knows what our position is. But perhaps you'll bring Mr. Ramadar up to speed when he arrives.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, no problem.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Peterson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
I see somebody has his hand up at the back. Is that Mr. Hussein Shah?
Yes, Chair. Good morning.
Good morning.
Just a quick word from the union. Mr. Peterson has referenced the mandate of the Commission, but insofar as it relates to the SWWTU's position, we'll be asking that the families be able to give that testimony.
You're opposing his application, are you?
Yes.
Would you like to give some consideration then to the points that he has raised, rather than just saying I oppose? In other words, addressing specifically.
Yes.
He says it has no probative value. He says that it is potentially prejudicial to his client and that it is irrelevant to the issues that this Commission have to consider utilising the terms of reference that we are mandated to consider.
Yes.
All right, so you might wish to address those matters.
Yes. I haven't had the opportunity to fully consider it, but in terms of the terms of reference of the Commission, one of those mandates relate to examining the role of Paria-LMCS in dealing with the incident. And another aspect of the Commission...
Which one? All right, look, I'm not going to do this now. I think that the realities
it's 12 on the website. I'm not sure on the actual listing what it will be.
Can I suggest that you give it some thought? Mr. Ramadar, who's just, I see, walked into the room, gives it some thought. What I will do is, before we have our break, I will hear any arguments from Mr. Ramadar and yourself, and then give Mr. Peterson an opportunity to reply to those arguments once you've formulated them. I appreciate it's just been sprung on you now, but please give it some further thought, put your arguments together, and then I'll hear them before we have our break this morning. All right?
Fair enough,
and then I'll make a decision during the break.
Grateful.
Thank you. Can we then proceed to the next witness, who I understand to be...
Mr. Andy Johnson is the next witness. Mr.
Yes. Thank you very much.
1525, and the summary of that evidence would be given by Ms. Vijaya Maharaj.
Yes. Good morning, Mr. Johnson.
Good morning.
Let's have the oath taken.
I,
Andy Johnson,
solemnly swear
that
the evidence I shall give to this commission in this case shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Mr. Johnson, thank you very much for coming. Can I apologise for you having waited patiently, I think, most of the day on Friday.
That's correct.
And then we didn't get to you, so I apologise for that. I know it's inconvenient, but I'm grateful that you're here this morning. And Ms. Maharaj is going to summarise your evidence, so please listen carefully to what she says. And then, assuming you agree with the summary, we can then proceed from there. Mr. Maharaj then will, I think, have a few questions for you, and then anybody else who might want to ask questions. I don't anticipate your evidence will take very long, although I have said that before and I've been wrong. So forgive me if that happens to be the case. But that's where we are. Please listen to what Ms. Maharaj has to say.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Johnson.
What page number? Sorry.
It's at page 1525 of Volume 4, the witness statement bundle.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Johnson was interviewed by the Commission. A witness statement was prepared for him to review based on that interview, and Mr. Johnson signed that witness statement on the 22nd of September, 2022. Mr. Johnson is the Chief of Operations of Eastern Emergency Response Services Limited. Mr. Johnson is also a confined space trained technician. Confined Space Rescue Service is a service provided when someone enters a space that is not configured for continuous occupancy, and there are certain hazards associated with the space, so in the event the individual is not able to exit on his own, the Eastern Confined Space team would be on standby to rescue that person. Confined space technicians are not trained to conduct confined space underwater rescuing. They are not trained as scuba divers, and therefore water in a pipeline would be considered an obstruction. Where an operation requires a change from breathing air to scuba air, confined space technicians are not trained for this and would not be able to provide a rescue service. Eastern has not in the past provided any rescue services in relation to subsea maintenance works at any company. At around 11:40 p.m. on Friday, 25th February 2022, Mr. Johnson received a telephone call from Arlene Chow, CEO of Heritage, requesting the services of Eastern to conduct a confined space operation. Mrs. Chow informed him that there were 4 persons trapped in a pipe. That is all the information he received at this point. At around 11:43 p.m. on Friday, Mrs. Patricia King of Heritage contacted Mr. Johnson via telephone and informed him that a diagram of the piping was sent to his phone via WhatsApp, and also that the Incident Command Center would be expecting his team. A photograph of the diagram sent to Mr. Johnson's phone is attached to his witness statement as AJ1. At around 11:45 p.m., Mr. Johnson contacted Eastern's Operation Scheduler Team Leader Junior Armstrong and activated the rescue team. A rescue team of 4 persons was activated with all the necessary equipment, such as ropes, pulley, carabiners, skeds, and also breathing air, to conduct a confined space rescue. Mr. Johnson stated that all of these things would have been needed to get a person out of a confined space, such as a pipe. The sked would have formed an encapsulation around the person, and ropes would have been used as a mechanical advantage to hoist the person out of the pipe. At around 12:20 a.m. on Saturday, Mr. Johnson and emergency response team leader Per Kulzak arrived at Paria. At approximately 1:25 a.m., the remaining Eastern team members arrived on the compound. At around 1:25 a.m., the Eastern team was briefed by the incident commander and advised of the time of that the incident occurred and the possibility that Paria may want to engage the services of Eastern for a rescue. In addition, the incident commander advised that due to variables around the incident, Eastern should prepare themselves for a retrieval and not a rescue due to the possibility that the divers may have expired. Mr. Johnson asked to be taken to the site to conduct a visual and dynamic risk assessment. The incident commander also pointed out a drawing on the board in that room. The drawing showed a sketch of the pipe which had 2 elbows and 2 uprights, and indicated that the length of the pipe was 120 meters across the seabed. At around 2:15 a.m., the Eastern team boarded a vessel and was taken to the scene of the incident. They arrived at Bird 6 at around 2:35 a.m. and were met by Paria personnel at the scene, who gave a breakdown of the incident location and pipe diameter by the pipe diameter. The Eastern team conducted a scene size-up and gathered preliminary information from the live video footage of the line provided from the HHSL Safety Systems Limited Remote Observation Vehicles, an ROV. Mr. Johnson stated that his duty as team leader is to conduct a risk assessment to ensure that where he is sending his team is safe. He stated that Eastern needed to see the actual area that they would make an entry, to establish the diameter of the pipe, and to figure out if the area was safe. Mr. Johnson stated that the diameter of the pipe was 40 inches and that was not a lot of room to move. It was therefore a high risk. In addition, Mr. Johnson says that the live footage showed that the pipe, as far as the ROV was able to go, was filled with water. As such, Mr. Johnson had a conversation with the Eastern team and told them that there was no way they could make an entry into the pipe. In addition, Mr. Johnson stated that in the footage there was something lodged there preventing the ROV from going forward, and his recollection was that the camera was able to go about 120 feet into the horizontal pipeline. As such, Mr. Johnson stated that he also considered the blockage as a factor in his assessment, but the most important factor was that they were not trained to do a water rescue. Mr. Johnson stated that whether the divers were alive or not was not part of his assessment, as Eastern does not determine whether someone was alive, nor do they pronounce someone dead after a period. He stated that they are called to perform a rescue. At approximately 3:45 a.m., Mr. Johnson made contact with the management team of Eastern and reported his findings and concerns relating to the high-level risk involved in conducting the rescue. The management decided the risk was too high and unacceptable for them. At 3:45 a.m., Mr. Johnson returned to the Incident Command Center from the incident site and informed the incident commander of his findings. He informed the incident commander that due to the video footage from the ROV, there was no way his team would be able to make entry to perform the rescue operation, as approximately 120 feet of the 1,200-foot pipeline was filled with water, and because of the water, the rescue required a diving team. Mr. Johnson also advised that the level of risk must be assessed by such a team before sending any more people in the line to prevent a reoccurrence and increase the number of casualties. At about 5 a.m., the Eastern team was placed on standby off-site pending a further assessment of the incident site. The Eastern team provided standby services for the next 12 hours. At about 7 p.m., they were called off the assignment by the incident management team. Mr. Johnson stated that at no point during the period 25th February until the recovery of the bodies of the divers did he or anyone from Eastern have any communication or attend any meetings with anyone from Paria or Heritage or any other company in relation to any rescue operation other than those described in his witness statement. Mr. Johnson, is that an accurate summary of your witness statement?
Could you please just clarify the diameter of the pipe that you read there for me, please?
You said that you said it that 120 feet of...
No, diameter.
Oh, the diameter, 30 inches.
Yes,
yes.
Yeah, I thought you said 40 as well.
Sorry, apologies.
I thought
yes.
Sorry.
Yes. Right. Well, with that caveat, are you content that that represents a fair summary of your evidence?
Yes, it is.
Thank you very much. Mr. Maharaj.
Mr. Johnson, good morning.
Good morning, sir.
I just have a few questions for you. The first time you were contacted by Paria was at 11:40 p.m. on Friday night.
That's correct.
And all that you were told by the person who contacted you was that there were 4 persons trapped in a pipe.
That's correct.
You were not told whether they were trapped in a pipe underwater.
No.
You assumed it was above on
Confined
land.
space, that's correct.
Because according to you, your team were not trained to do a water rescue from a pipe,
That's
a
correct.
pipe underwater. And it was not until 1:25 a.m. on Saturday that you were briefed and you were told by Paria, if I understand your evidence correctly, to prepare for a recovery and not a rescue?
No.
No. What?
We should prepare ourselves in the event because in our job, even though Paria didn't say it, in our job, we prepare for both.
Okay,
right?
so...
we look at the incident and we prepare for both. It could be a recovery, it could be a rescue because it's a confined space.
Okay, so that was a feeling coming from your team and not from Paria?
Yes.
Okay, I understand.
But it was not until 1:25 that you became aware that it was filled with water or hydrocarbons.
That's correct.
Right, that was the first you knew of it.
That's correct.
Right, thank you.
I think that's all for you. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, anyone else? Yes, Ms. Nairi Alfonso, please.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Johnson. My name is Nairi Alfonso, and I represent the interests of the SWWTU. Just a few questions to you, sir. You referred in your witness statement to something called a dynamic risk assessment.
That's correct.
Okay. Could you assist me and tell me what that would have entailed in relation to the situation you met on, well, in your case, I'll say the 26th of February.
Okay, so what that does, what a dynamic risk assessment really is, we go on the scene and observe what is going on, gather information as to what has happened, when it happened, what are we dealing with, and we do a dynamic risk assessment as to how we are going to formulate our rescue plan in order to retrieve the person from within the confined space.
And I see from your witness statement, you would have you did a visual inspection, you did your risk assessment. Could you give me an idea? That risk assessment is something that you have to document, it's something that you formulate in your mind?
And that's why we say dynamic. Dynamic risk assessment is done on the spot. It's done within time. So you go on the scene and the scene change ever so often. So we're doing a confined space into a vessel or into a pipeline. The drawing that we get, it shows us a pipeline, but within that pipeline now, there is obstructions. So let's say it have up-down bends, right, then we need to change our risk assessment to suit that, right? So it's done within the space of time. So it's not written down, but there is risk assessment that is written down for certain process and procedures.
So in the wee hours of the 26th of February, Mr. Johnson, when you say you did a dynamic risk assessment, you did something within a quick period of time, or it's something that took you some time before you formulated what the company's position would be, or your position would be?
So gathering the information, we did gather information as to what we were dealing with. Yes, we know it was a pipe, but the pipe had water, right? So by doing a risk assessment, we eliminate that we could possibly make an entry because of this water.
Okay.
Right?
What I'm trying to get at, Mr. Johnson, did that take you 10 minutes, 15 minutes, a half an hour?
Within 10 minutes.
Within 10 minutes?
Yes.
Okay. So that, and you did your visual inspection, you did your dynamic risk assessment.
Yes.
And is it that if you had found that there was some part that Eastern emergency response could play, you would have continued to do other things?
That's correct.
Right, in terms of your risk assessment?
That's correct.
Okay, but you did a brief analysis, kind of lawyer's term, sorry.
That's correct.
Brief assessment, and you were able to do that within 10 minutes?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. I've tried to understand exactly, and I want to get the word correct. Eastern Emergency Response Services. There's a related company, Eastern Divers.
So it's a group of companies. Eastern Divers is one of the company. Eastern Emergency is one of the company also.
Okay.
So it's a group of companies.
Okay. When you realized that this was a water environment, an environment that contained water, seawater in particular, did you reach out to anybody from Eastern Divers?
No, that's not my call. That's the call of the IC. That's the call of the incident command.
Oh, thank you.
I can't call out anyone.
Okay, I see. At any point in time, Mr. Johnson, were you told by somebody, as you say, the ICT, let me rephrase that, either from Paria's ICT or from anybody from Heritage, because it is Heritage who contacted you. Did anybody tell you that the lines, the pipeline that you had the diagram in your WhatsApp would be pumped down?
I think that may have been a conversation within the room that I was in when we were getting the brief. But it was not a direct conversation to me.
Okay. So it was something discussed generally in the room while you were there?
Yes.
Okay. Because I had the impression when I read it, not in your witness statement, that this was a plan that would allow Eastern, your company, Eastern Emergency Response, to enter that confined space because it would the water would be pumped out of it. So it would be a dry environment. I had that impression, but you didn't get that impression when you were there.
Well, we were placed on standby.
Okay.
We were placed on standby. So if that, as I said, that was a conversation within the room, probably that was their mindset or their thought pattern as to when it is pumped down, then we would be engaged again.
And ultimately, Mr. Johnson, you formed the view that your organization, yourself and your team present that in the early hours could not assist.
That's correct.
In entering the pipe.
That's correct.
And I see by 5 o'clock in the morning, about 5 or so hours after your first call out, you were placed on standby off-site.
That's correct.
That means you returned to your base?
That means that we return to our base.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Johnson. Thank you for your answers.
To Ramadan.
Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, Commission. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
First of all, thank you for spending some time with us today. You got to Paria at what time, remind us? Was it around 12:30 a.m.?
It was around 12:30.
Yes. And I'm quite interested in what you described as your dynamic rescue plan. I love the word dynamic. Could you explain what that means for us?
So as I indicated, the dynamic...
Let me make it quite clear. No trick questions here. Simple, I just want to...
The dynamic risk assessment is done on the spot.
Yes.
Right? So we would have a risk assessment that governs us for a particular job.
Yes.
But during the time of the incident, there are changes that take place. So we need to modify the risk assessment on the spot. So we look at the situation and we tweak our response in a safe manner to suit that situation.
I appreciate that so much. Now, you got to the actual site of the accident at around, I understand, 2:30, some 2 hours after your first arrival at Paria.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
And before you got to the site, you were amongst Paria personnel and personalities. Is that correct? At their office?
At the command center.
At the command center. And of course, you, being a professional, wanted to get as much information as you possibly could.
Yes.
Yes? So that, as you just told us, the dynamic rescue plan will be determined by changing circumstances, correct?
Yes.
You observed, of course, so that there will be no uncertainty. There was written information on a whiteboard in that room.
Not where I was located, sir.
They didn't show you a whiteboard with step-by-step what happened or anything
The
like
only
that?
whiteboard I saw was with a diagram on it.
With a diagram?
Yes.
Was it brought to your attention that from earlier in the day, Paria's view was that the likelihood of survival was limited?
No.
No. Was that of interest to you?
Of course it was of interest to me.
As I say, no trick question. So, yeah. And you appreciate, as a professional who we respect, that when divers go missing underwater, there's a high level of urgency that is required to rescue them.
I can't speak to divers and rescue, sir, because I do not have that competence.
Thank you so much. So, your company was called for what purpose?
Confined space rescue.
Right. So, when you got there, you did not have the expertise, as you are telling us now, to ascertain the urgency that may be required for divers underwater in perilous conditions. Is that what you're telling us?
Come at that question again?
Certainly. When you got there, yes, you did not have the expertise, as you just told us, to determine even the urgency that may be required to rescue divers who may have found themselves in grave difficulty underwater.
Okay, so I'm going to repeat myself. As I indicated,
yes,
I was told it was a confined space rescue.
Yes.
Divers in the pipe and divers in the water was not a conversation. Right?
So you did not, I beg your pardon, do finish.
After which,
yes,
I arrived, we were given a diagram on the board, indicated that the divers were in the pipe.
Yes.
Right? No water was discussed. Right?
Yeah.
So if we have divers in a pipe, a dry pipe, it's a confined space rescue.
Thank you so much. So nobody at Paria even gave you an inkling, let's get this clear, that there was water in the pipe, correct?
Right.
They didn't give you an inkling of information that there may have been oil in the pipe?
I knew there were oil in the pipe.
Who did you learn that
It's a riser.
I didn't ask you that. From whom did you learn that there was oil in the pipe?
No one.
Thank you. So as far as you are concerned, the information that you were fettered with was that men were in a pipe, as far as you're concerned, without water and possibly some oil. Correct?
Correct.
Yes. And you were to use that information to come up with a dynamic rescue plan?
No.
Huh?
No.
Well, a
The
dynamic
information
assessment
that I would use to come up with my dynamic rescue plan would be the information that I am seeing in front of me.
Oh, beautiful.
Not the information that they are giving me.
Thank you.
Right?
I could understand why you trust what they had to tell you. I could understand that. You have to make your own assessment.
Correct.
So, by 2:35, you were first on the site, correct?
That's correct.
You went into the water.
No, I did not.
You went into the pipe.
No, I did not.
So you got other information?
From the visual camera. If you read the
No. So you hear
from
live
the
evidence.
visual camera, the
Yes.
ROV,
Yes.
I would have seen that there were water in the pipe.
Beautiful.
That is where I draw my conclusion.
And your conclusion was that there was water in the pipe?
Correct.
What else?
Something stuck in the pipe.
Something. You didn't know what it was?
Yes, I knew what it was.
What was it?
A breathing air bottle.
Not a welded piece of metal that could not be removed.
A breathing air bottle, sir. That's what I saw from the camera
Right.
footage.
And as far as you know, breathing air bottles can be mobile. You could push it and it will move in water.
Okay.
Not okay. I'm asking you, the expert.
Oh.
You were called in.
No, I'm not the diving expert, sir.
No, not diving. You're the man who had to make assessment
For
to come up with a
confined space
rescue plan.
rescue.
Yes, of course.
Just a moment. Mr. Johnson.
Sir?
If, when you were first called, which I understand to be shortly before midnight,
yes,
between the Friday and the Saturday morning, yes? If you had been told by the person who called you, look, Mr. Johnson, we have a pipe filled with water and hydrocarbons in which 4 men are stuck. We have no idea whereabouts in this pipe, but they're underwater or hydrocarbons. Are you able to assist? What would your response to that inquiry have been?
No.
Thank you. So you wouldn't have been there at all
Correct,
if you'd been told what the position was from the beginning, would you?
Correct.
Right, so it really doesn't matter that once you got there and you, having then discovered that that was the position, whatever contribution you could make was going to be virtually zero.
Zero.
Thank you very much. Is there really anything more that we can extract from this witness, Mr. Ramadar?
Just bear with me for a few moments. I shan't be long. So, in terms of the, you chose, learning all that you did then, that you couldn't do a rescue, correct?
Yes.
Yes. And from your experience, from whatever source, you knew this accident occurred at what time?
When I got the call.
No, I didn't. I beg your pardon. I put it inelegantly. What time did you learn the accident to have occurred?
Minutes to 12 on Friday night.
So you had no idea that this thing occurred around 3 o'clock?
I was on work practically whole day. I left Enquiry and headed to Point 14, in which on my way I got a call.
Of course, and I know that's a serious journey. I appreciate that. What I'm asking you, whilst at Paria or on this site, did you learn as to what time the accident actually occurred?
You're not asking the question. Yes, I did.
Oh, you want to play it this way? Okay.
No.
Yeah.
No, I think there's a little misunderstanding between
the
first
two of
you. Mr. Johnson.
Are you ready?
Were you ever told, Mr. Johnson, that this incident in which these men were trapped in the pipe occurred at about 2:30 that afternoon?
At the IC.
Right, so when you were at the IC, that's when you were told that?
Yes.
So you didn't get to learn that until you arrived at the site?
That's correct.
Does that help, Mr. Ramadar?
So generous of you, sir. Now, with common sense, you appreciate when you learned that there would have been water in that pipe, that men would have needed oxygen, they would have needed air to survive, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. Did you know whether they had viable tanks and how long? There are two parts of this question. Whether first you knew that they had viable tanks and how long at best those tanks would have lasted in terms of oxygen. No. At the time you got to the scene at 2:35, what was your view of the likelihood of survival of these men in this pipe since around 3 o'clock?
How could he possibly answer that question? He is not a dive expert. He has no idea how much air is in a tank, how long a person can live with a tank, how much air is in the pipe, if there is any air in it. None of this concerns him.
Well, that is the point. Why were you called?
Well, the fact...
Thank you very much.
I share your view, Mr. Ramadar. There was no need to call him at all.
Yeah.
But that we have managed to establish. Had he been told what the position was, he wouldn't have even gone.
Yeah.
He would have joined the rest of the revelry, no doubt, for the carnival that was existing in the course of that week.
Yeah, You must have been too tired to have enjoyed it that day.
Oh, there was none. I'm told there was none. Yes,
there was
course.
none. Well, there you
we
go.
were all riven with COVID, right? All right.
Yeah.
Look, I don't think we can take this any further.
One last question.
Which is?
Yeah. Your company, of course, would have billed Paria by now, haven't they?
I do not know. I do not work accounts. I have no information as it relates to accounting.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions for Mr. Johnson? Could there be any other questions for Mr. Johnson? No, I suspect not. Thank you.
We don't have any.
No, right. Thank you. Mr. Johnson, for all the time that you've waited to give your evidence, that is it. All right. I'm very grateful for you attending, and you're free to go. Thank you
Thank
so
you very much, sir.
Thank you. Before the next witness is called, Mr. Ramadar, have you been brought up to speed with the objection to certain evidence being given to this commission by Mr. Peterson on behalf of Paria?
I have, in fact, been informed by my Ms. Boodhan that Paria is taking a position that the families ought not to be given any audience, whether in writing or
Correct.
So.
Correct.
I find it shocking.
Well, just before how shocking you find it, can you just, are you in a position to be able to deal with that objection at this time?
I could
or do you want more time?
I think it would be better if we had a little bit more time.
All right, then
but I shan't, if it should inconvenience
I will hear the application before we have our mid-morning break, please. I'd say I'll hear your response to the application before our mid-morning break. So you'll have to do two jobs at once, all right? And I'll also hear from Mr. Hossein Shah, who has indicated he also takes a position. So before the break, which will probably be in the course of the next 40 minutes or so, I will hear that application. All right, thank you. Our next witness then, please, is, I think, Mr. Anderson Gill. Have I got that right? Yes, thank you. He's a commercial diver with Hull Support Services, yes? I think he's here. Yes, Mr. Anderson Gill, the oath is going to be administered now, so please take the oath.
I, Anderson Gill,
solemnly swear
that the evidence
I shall give
to this commission
in this case
shall be the truth, the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
nothing but the truth.
Oh, okay. Who's doing? Well, Mr. Gill, thank you very much for coming. I know you were inconvenienced on Friday, and so I apologise for that.
It's okay.
All right. Well, thank you anyway for coming this morning. I don't anticipate your evidence will take very long.
No.
Mr. Bissessar, who sits opposite you, is going to give a summary of your evidence, all right? So listen carefully to what he has to say, and then at the conclusion of that, you agree with it, we'll then be able to proceed. Mr. Maharaj will have a few questions for you, and then anybody else who might want to ask you something, all right? Thank you very much, Mr. Bissessar. What page are we on?
Thank you. Page 2998 of the Supplemental Witness Fund. Mr. Anderson Gill was interviewed by counsel to the Commission and on 17th November 2022 gave a witness statement to the Commission, which is at WB or SWB 2998. Chair, with your permission, I will actually read the witness statement. It's fairly brief.
All right.
I, Anderson Gill of Garanage Commercial Diver, say as follows. I am a commercial diver, and I was certified in 2008 by the Professional Diving Centre in South Africa. In 2018, I received my certificate of diver medic from Institut National de Plongée Professionnelle in Marseille, France. I also received a first aid and commercial diver certification in 2018 from INPP, as well as certification as an approved HSE, recognized IMCA surface supplied top-up diver, and he has exhibited copies of his certificates. These qualifications mean I am accredited as an internationally trained commercial diver, and I can dive with mixed gases, which is called saturation diving. There are about 19 commercial divers in Trinidad and Tobago who are similarly qualified, which allows us to dive for international oil and gas companies, particularly those which operate off the east coast of Trinidad. Generally, commercial diving relates to diving at depths in excess of 150 feet. I provide diving services to Hull Support Services Limited and other companies as an independent contractor. I've worked with Hull since 2008, and generally, I assist in relation to the inspection of and removal of debris from the seabed before a pipeline is installed. I also assist in maintenance and repair works on the pipelines and other confined space projects. I was not involved in the rescue of any of the divers following the incident on 25th February 2022. My only involvement was on, I believe, 6th and 7th March 2022, when I was retained by Hull as part of a team of commercial divers to detach the crane hook, which was then attached to the habitat, which was resting on the seabed approximately 50 feet below off Berth 6. The team comprised of Anthony Livet, Supervisor Emile Elijon, or Elegon, forgive me, Mario Waldron, Roger Rose, and myself. The dive was completed in about 15 minutes, and Emile Elegon actually did the dive to remove the crane hook from the habitat. This dive was based on a surface supply of air, which means that oxygen was generated on the vessel with an umbilical providing communication, lighting, and rope. I recall on Friday, 25th February 2022, at about 5 p.m. or so, I received a text message for divers for an emergency rescue. I was taking my children for swimming classes, so I could not respond. And Mr. Gill certifies that the facts stated in his witness statement are true and correct to the best of his knowledge, information, and belief. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Maharaj.
Yes.
Mr. Gill, were you asked at any time by Paria to give any advice in respect of a rescue operation of men who were trapped in a pipeline?
No.
No. If you were asked by Paria to give such an opinion, would you have been prepared to consider giving such an opinion?
Yeah.
And based on your experience as a diver, would you have had any experience in either diving or giving opinions in respect of persons trapped in a pipeline?
No, I don't.
Or any person trapped underwater?
No,
in a
that's
confined
not.
Space?
No.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I missed that. I was speaking to my colleague.
The question was, he said no to the question of any person trapped underwater in a confined space. He never gave an opinion on that.
You didn't, or you wouldn't?
I didn't.
You didn't, right, thank you.
But notwithstanding the fact that you have not given an opinion in the past, would you consider yourself to be equipped with the knowledge as a diver to consider giving such an opinion depending on the circumstances?
If I had the right team, yeah.
Yeah, okay. And if you were asked on the Friday, the 25th of February last year, to give such an opinion, you would have obviously tried to get the team and give such an opinion.
Yeah.
No further questions.
Yes, does anybody else have any questions for Mr. Gill? Yes, Ms. Nairi Alfonso.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Gill.
Morning.
My name is Nairi Alfonso. I am the representative of the SWWTU. I just have a couple of questions to ask you. Following from my learned senior, Mr. Maharaj, have you, I see you have experience in maintenance and repair works on pipelines.
Yes.
Okay. Have you had the occasion, and I'm not talking about rescue, to yourself in the course of your duties, go into a pipeline?
No.
Okay. Can you tell me, Mr. Gill, following from Mr. Maharaj's question as well, if you had the right equipment, if you had the right team, and you'd been able to put together a team of similarly qualified persons as yourself, would you consider entering into a pipe to conduct a rescue?
Once it could fit, yeah.
Once what?
Once it could fit.
Once you could fit?
Yeah.
Okay, and your fellow team members are not too big?
Yeah.
Okay, I got you. Thank you very much, Mr. Gill. Mr. Gill, just one last question from you. Do you recall, I understood that you could not yourself, you received a text message on the Friday requesting, or text message requesting divers for an emergency rescue. Mm-hmm. You recall that in your witness statement, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Gill, you recall who that text message came from?
It's a group of divers. We have a group we just communicate.
You have like a WhatsApp group?
Yeah, WhatsApp group.
Okay, so there was an emergency amongst your brother divers.
And the group divers trapped a pipeline and they're looking for divers.
So the group was reaching out to available divers who could assist?
Yeah.
But I note that you couldn't assist?
No.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Gill.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
No, sir.
I want to ask you something which you haven't actually been asked to deal with up until now. But in water, a person weighs, or appears to weigh, rather less than they do on land.
Yeah.
Much to the pleasure of those of us who are a little overweight. But the fact is that that is true also of all obstacles in water.
Everything will have air, some kind of air in it, so we have water.
Right. And obviously, seawater is different from water in a lake because there's salt in seawater, which makes you more buoyant. All of us who swim know that you can swim perhaps a little further in seawater than you can in freshwater, yes?
Yeah.
And so there are all kinds of factors which impact on your buoyancy in water.
Yeah, correct.
And that applies equally to the tanks that divers use for diving.
Yeah.
Scuba diving.
Scuba tanks, yeah.
I have one here. This one's full of air.
Yeah.
So it feels quite heavy, right? Mm. If there's any doubt, you can tell there's air in it.
Yeah, it's pressure in it,
In water, picking this up out of water is quite heavy, as I say, but in water, depending on how much air is in it, it can find a point of buoyancy, can it not?
Yeah.
Sorry, thank you.
As the pressure goes down the tank gets buoyant.
If this was in a pipe with air in it, fully filled tank, the likelihood is, let's deal with seawater, all right? Mm-hmm. Forget anything else. If that were in a pipe with seawater, would that sit, do you think, on the bottom of the pipe?
Yeah, it would.
It would, wouldn't it? Just lay on the bottom. Yeah. If it were empty or partially empty, it may find a point of buoyancy, might it
should
not? Start to float.
Yeah, because even if it's on your back and you're diving, you could tell your tank which 1,000 psi, it has come off your back. So you don't know what your gauge, you could feel the tank actually leaving your back, knowing you reach 1,000 psi. Right. Automatically, if you're accustomed diving, you could know that.
All I'm trying to establish, or understand really, because my knowledge of diving is very limited and I've had to rely on everybody else, but there is a suggestion, you see, that one of these tanks was lodged in the pipe, stuck in the pipe. Now the pipe is 30 inches. This is 28. I'm trying to understand how it's possible for that tank to lodge itself in a pipe that's 30 inches in diameter in such a way that it could not be pushed.
What is pushing it?
Well, some sort of camera or ROV was pushing it along, you know, a crawler of some kind.
Probably the power of the crawler, how strong the force the crawler had to push it forward.
Right.
Probably.
So if it's filled with air, if that tank was filled with air and was laying on the bottom of the pipe, it would still be relatively heavy, wouldn't it? Even for a crawler to push it along.
I don't know. I don't know what is the crawler exactly to say, but the crawler couldn't crawl over it.
Well, yeah, I think that's a different question. I'm just trying to establish the evidence. Some evidence. We've had some evidence. You see that this tank was in some way lodged in the pipe, such that it couldn't be moved. And we know that the pipe inside was coated with a very slippery, slimy, oily surface that no doubt had been accumulated over years of the pipe having been containing oil.
Yeah, but answering that question without seeing the crawler or knowing what is the crawler would be almost difficult to know the ability of the crawler.
No, I follow that. It depends on the force of the crawler.
Yeah.
But just in terms of a full, partially full or empty tank, your understanding would be that if it was full, it's laying on the bottom of the pipe, and probably could be slid along.
Yeah.
If it were partially full, it might find a point of buoyancy.
Yeah.
And it might be at an angle.
It would be lighter, yeah.
And if it was empty, it would be floating.
Not floating, but the buoyancy more.
Yeah, a point of buoyancy. I say
just
floating.
to the way you want to push it up, push it across.
Right. It would be relatively easy.
Yeah.
I mean, touch it and it would move, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Yes. All right. Just for completeness' sake, this is a regulator. I've been calling them spiders because scuba divers have two more pipes that come out of this rather than just the two that we see on this one. There are 4 pipes. You get an additional one of these.
That's called a working regulator. Yeah.
Yes, another regulator, and then you get also another pipe that connects to your BCD, which you can then inflate. Yes, all right. So if this were in the pipe as well, either attached or unattached, presumably attached, that might, I suppose, provide some additional reason why it might get caught up on the inside somehow. All right. Yes, thank you very much. Does anyone else have any questions arising from that little exercise which I've taken upon myself?
Certainly, just one question.
Of course.
The chairman has put to you that if the tank was, I understood the question, if the tank was lying flat in the pipe. But if the tank was horizontal in the pipe, given the diameter of the pipe and the size of the tank, would you accept that it could become stuck in that position?
Stuck, again, depends on the force. It can never lodge because, as I say, it's a slippery pipe. If the tank, even at this angle, and you push here, the tank holds straight. And this way, like this inside the pipeline. It will never.
Can you just lay that tank flat in that hoop for me, please?
Not you,
Not you, Mr. Chairman.
I'm happy to do as you command, I would have done the exercise myself, but for the fact that hoop is actually only 28 inches. And so it wouldn't be a fair exercise.
Right.
And it's not exactly round either. Right. So, I mean, I think we can measure this, and you might want to consider put this on.
Yeah.
No, don't ask him to put on the spider.
Yeah,
I'm not only tanking on himself. Don't.
That creates a ceiling, and you can breathe with it. I'm not going to. So that would be how it looks. You should bear in mind there would be an additional pipe coming from the top and from the bottom.
Right, so I don't know if you're in a position to tell us, Mr. Gill, but with the additional apparatus connected to that tank, would it be fair to say that the distance between the base of the tank and the top of the apparatus is in the order of or exceeds 30 inches? Are you able to say?
No.
Okay. No further questions, Mr. Witness.
Well, we can measure it, Mr. Mutlu. Yeah, I think it would be sensible to do that. But I think we also need to bear in mind that the images that we do have of the inside of it, Mr. Gill hasn't seen those. We have. The pipe isn't standing upright. The bottle isn't standing upright in the pipe. It is at a slight angle, as I recall it, in the pipe. So that's where I think we are. But I'm perfectly happy to have that measured, and you can make whatever representations you wish about it. As I say, the spiders that scuba divers use, and Mr. Gill, I think you've confirmed this, has 2 additional pipes coming out of that breathing, the regulator that I've just connected.
Octopus and the BCD hose.
Yeah, like spider or octopus. Anyway, it has 2 additional pipes coming from it. All right. Thank you very much. Does anybody else have anything to ask? No. Mr. Wilson? No. All right. Thank you very much indeed. Okay. Mr. Maharaj, anything else? No. Right. Just before we call Mr. Donovan next, I'm asked for a 5-minute break, and we will have a 5-minute break. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming, Mr. Gill. I'm glad it was short and sweet. Thank you. We'll rise for 5 minutes. Thank you. Ronnie, would you come join? Thank you. Mr. Dollar, I believe, is next. Is he not? Yes, thank you. How long do we anticipate Mr. Donovan to be?
I would just be about 10 or 15 minutes with Mr. Donovan.
Should we hear the application now, then, before dealing with Mr. Donovan? Then I at least have that in my mind.
That might be the best thing.
Yes. Mr. Ramadar seems to have gone walking again.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. He just stepped out to use the washroom. He shall be back.
I'll wait a moment. I think we have, in any event, a response from Mr. Hussein Shah on behalf of the union.
Yes, Chair.
Are you ready to deal with that now?
I wouldn't say ready, but we can deal with it.
Ready enough?
Ready enough.
Okay, good, very well. Let's make a start then, shall we?
Yes.
While we're waiting for Mr. Ramadan.
Yes. I'm not quite sure whether the procedural rules can be put on the screen or whether you have a hard copy of it, but I'll be referring to the procedural rules.
Yes, we do. We can have the rules put on the screen, no problem.
Sorry, Chair, let me know when you have it before you.
It's coming up on the screen in a moment. While that's being done, I've got them in front of me.
Sure. If I can take you to Rule 4812.
For A12?
Yes.
Yes, I got it.
Yes. So Rule 4812 of the procedural rules provides that one of the mandates of the Commission is to examine the role played by Paria and LMCS in dealing with the incidents. Now, I also want to go to beyond examining. The Commission is tasked with making observations and recommendations with respect to the appropriate best practices and policies and/or procedures to be utilized by companies such as Paria and LMCS in response to these types of incidents. And that mandate is found at at Rule 4B4 of the procedural rules. Now, clearly, the Commission is entitled...
Just a moment, let me just read it.
Yes.
The appropriate and best practices. Yes.
Yes, so clearly the Commission is entitled to receive evidence with respect to those matters, or which will assist the Commission in fulfilling its mandates. And the mandate we're looking at right now is the response and the role and how these incidents were dealt with. Now, the general rule for receiving such evidence is to be found at Rule 23 of the procedural rules. And the rule is this: the Commission may receive evidence in such or any form that it considers to be helpful, and that's a word I want to focus on, helpful, in fulfilling the terms of reference, whether or not such evidence would be admissible in a court of law. So that the test is one of helpfulness, not necessarily relevance, though in our respectful submission, the evidence is relevant. But just for the sake of putting the relevant matters before the Commission, the test is one of helpfulness. And then the second limb of the general rule is that the Commission is not bound by the rules of admissibility as would be found, for example, in the court of law. Now, to be fair, the rules do mention relevance at Rule 43. So if you can bring that up. And in the context of relevance, the rule provides that the resolution of such objections is that the Commission shall give such weight to that evidence as you, the Commission, deem appropriate. There is no exclusionary wording. There is no exclusionary wording contained in that. It is a matter of weight for the Commission to determine, and the Commission is perfectly in a position to determine the weight of the evidence to be given by the families. But in considering relevance, so should the Commission not be minded to accept those, I guess, technical arguments, in considering the relevance of the evidence, when we look at dealing with the incident and responses to the incident, clearly those considerations would involve how LMCS and the Paria dealt with the families. And that would involve communication, that would involve support, and it will involve, quite naturally, the impact to the families. This Commission has heard evidence with respect to LMCS, with respect to how LMCS and the Paria dealt with the families. In fact, a core part of the evidence of the ICT involved the opening of channels of communication, communicating with the families, the provision of psychological support and financial support in the form of, I believe it was groceries and a MasterCard. So that is evidence that the Commission has already heard. In considering that evidence and in applying it to the mandate, for example, in dealing with policies which may come out of, which may be recommended, or procedures which may be recommended by this Commission, and having regard to the evidence that has been heard thus far, which has thus far been considered to be relevant, clearly consideration must be given to the evidence of the families who were directly involved, who received or were involved in those deliberations. That evidence would be directly relevant to those matters. The Commission can't necessarily hear from one side and exclude the families entirely. That would be a quite unfair proposition. So that just to summarize, the position of the Union is that, one, the evidence is helpful within the meaning of the rules. Two, the evidence is relevant. And in any event, the Commission is entitled to hear whatever evidence it deems fit, and it will ascribe whatever weight it considers necessary to that evidence. And unless there's anything else I can assist the Commission with, those are our respectful submissions.
Thank you very much. Most helpful. Mr. Ramadar.
First of all, let me congratulate my learned colleague for so clearly stating the authority and the responsibility of this Commission to allow such evidence. In fact, I want to suggest that to do otherwise will be to perpetuate the accident and the consequences of the accident. If one is to take the narrowest and illogical view that the accident ended on the 25th, going into the 26th and on the 27th and possibly onto the 28th of February, one would be missing the point altogether. Because this Commission is fully entitled to look at not just the causes but the consequences of the accident. And if I may reference the terms of reference literally at 2, and if I will be permitted to read it to you, to make such findings, observations...
Just a moment.
I beg your pardon, sir.
Where are we?
At terms of reference of this Commission.
Right.
Yes.
1 and 2.
Yes, at 2.
Yes.
I shall read with your permission.
Yes.
To make such findings, observations, and recommendations arising out of its deliberations as may be deemed appropriate in relation, and I take you directly to 6, making any other recommendations that may be deemed necessary in the circumstances. So under your terms of reference, I fully endorse and adopt the arguments put forward by my learned friend, Mr. Shaw. And I am making the bigger point that we cannot have an accident or an incident without fully appreciating the consequences. And the consequences is not just on Paria. Indeed, the ultimate consequence would have been the loss of human life and the loss to her daughter Aaliyah Henry, to her mother Tia Supersad, to the wife of Faisal Kurban, the 2 sons of Faisal Kurban, and the daughter of Faisal Kurban. They have to live on with an injury that has been inflicted upon them, thankfully not physical, but yet worse than that, an emotional injury that they could never heal. One can only hope and pray that it could heal. So therefore, this is directly relevant to the accident and its consequences. And to suggest that it does not fall within the confines of the authority of this commission would be to miss the point altogether. This is a commission not for the lawyers, not for the commissioners, not for the parias and the companies. This is a commission for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And if the people of Trinidad and Tobago need to hear who these men were, that their lives mattered, and their consequences on their families, and we've heard from Mr. Mushtaq that the lawyers stopped him from engaging in any meaningful remedy moving forward. And I want to say up front, and I know it's not this group of lawyers, there's another group of lawyers hired by Paria to deal with this. So this is directly relevant. This amounts to what the courts admit on a daily basis in our criminal proceedings and in other places, victim impact statements. And I am really surprised by my noble and generous friend, Mr. Peterson. Of course, I am sure, acting only under instructions, will take this position to not allow the country to know who these dead men were, what they represented, and more importantly, to suffocate the voices of those who are so powerless. And I want to thank all those who have assisted on this side representing the families, that they are powerless and they are victimized to hear this, because I've spoken, there are members of the family here today, Joseph Henry's family, and they are appalled to know that such a position could be taken. So in Mr. Nagesa's wife is also here, because they are interested in this. This is their commission. This is their inquiry, paid for by taxpayers' dollars. And if my friend, of course, Mr. Peterson will say, well, we have to go within the confines of the law and the remit of this commission, it is directly within terms of reference 2(6), because the accident and its consequences continue in the hearts and in the beings of those who are left behind, those who are intimately connected, the families and the wider relatives and the citizens of this country. Unless I could assist you any further. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. Anyone else from the various teams who want to say anything before I return to Mr. Peterson after having asked Mr. Maharaj if he has anything? No? Mr. Maharaj, is there anything you want to say in response to the application made by Mr. Peterson?
Mr. Chairman, it would seem to me that the terms of reference permit the Commission to hear the representations of the family, and in particular, the terms of reference which says that the Commission may make any other recommendations that may be deemed necessary in the circumstances.
Yes.
it would seem to me that it would be abdication of the responsibility of the Commission not to allow the families of the deceased persons to say what they want to say on this occasion. That's all I have.
Yes. Thank you. Mr. Peterson, I invite you obviously to reply. Can I just say this, that in relation to the specific terms of reference that this Commission have been given, I made very clear, I think, on the very first day that it sat, when I, as the Chairman, introduced the issues to the inquiry, that I did not regard myself in any event as being confined by them, but merely that they were the terms of reference, and if I considered it appropriate to view any other facts that might be of assistance in coming to the necessary conclusions in this inquiry, we would look at them. I raise that because I don't regard myself necessarily as bound by each and every clause and the wording of each and every clause. I regard that as the primary source of our responsibility, but if there were anything outside that that was necessary for the purposes of identifying issues that needed tackling and or recommendations that needed making, we would look at them. So I say that just so that you're aware that I wouldn't necessarily regard myself as being totally bound by it. All right?
Well, Mr. Chairman, if I was under the mistaken impression that the terms of reference is what grounds and guides and circumscribe the jurisdiction of the Commission.
Grounds and guides, not circumscribes.
Well, we seem to respectfully have a different view on that, so I respect yours. The point is that the terms of reference, as counsel, let me put it first up front, as counsel, it's my duty to assist the Commission not to exceed its terms of reference, if I am of that respectful view. So I have a duty to assist the Commission. I don't have the liberty of some of the other counsel to make speeches about emotion and public and all of that. That may be fine, but the terms of reference as they stand, and my experience has been, and the law has supported me, that if after terms of reference have been issued and there is an occasion to widen them, to give wider jurisdiction, there is always amend the terms that are issued. So I looked at the terms of reference when Mr. Chairman indicated last week the indication that where you were going with the family. And I consider all that, what some of the lawyers say about ventilating and all of that. I consider that. But then I also considered my duty as counsel. And when I married against the terms of reference, I came to the percolated view that I had to assist the Commission because this Commission is born out of Section 7 of the Act and the terms of reference, and it being out of the statute, it gives it its life and its jurisdiction circumscribed by the settled terms of reference from Her Excellency the President. And that is what informed my my assistance, what I consider to be an assistance to the Commission today to object to that evidence has been outside the terms of reference. Let me also say, there is no intent by my client and by extension me to seek to stifle any voice. That is not the reason for this application or this objection. It is purely as a counsel in the Commission to assist the Commission. Mr. Ramadan referred to another team of lawyers in some other proceedings. I understand, just aside, that there are pre-action protocol letters and all of that, so there is no stifling. There will be full ventilation of that elsewhere, I gather, but I'm not involved in that. Well, at least at this stage. I'm not, that is not a plug for reconsideration elsewhere. But the point is so that, so there's no intent to stifle anyone. It's just.
But do you accept that that actually is the effect of your application?
Well, so that's what we live by in courts every day, that we have to stand by the law and the consequences will flow therefrom.
But this isn't a court, is it? I mean,
no,
I appreciate we're governed by many of the rules of the court.
It's not a court.
But it is a public inquiry designed to bring out all of the issues for the public's consideration as well as our own. They should be entitled, shouldn't they, to hear all of the things that impact upon the ultimate decisions that we will need to make. I have in mind particularly, and of course nobody else has suggested that this evidence is evidence which might be given outside of the terms of reference. That was my suggestion, and I perhaps put it rather inelegantly when I suggested that we are not bound by the strictures of its terms. I mean by that the terms themselves give us a very wide latitude in its interpretation, so that when you look to, as has been pointed out to me both by Mr. Maharaj and Mr. Hussain Shah, that paragraph 2, little 6 of the terms make clear that we are to make such findings, observations and recommendations arising out of these deliberations as may be deemed appropriate in relation specifically to making any other recommendations that might be deemed necessary in the circumstances. And one of the factors that we are engaged in is the level of communication between Paria and the families of those who are still in the pipe. And that, it seems to us, is a proper consideration.
I understood the temptation that Mr. Shah fell prey to when he ran to the recommendations in aid of his submission. The recommendations are usually born out of what the terms of reference gave jurisdiction to inquire into. Having executed the inquiry pursuant and in faithfulness to the terms, then out of that, recommendations are born. But one doesn't seek to pray the recommendations in aid of expanding the terms of reference. But so I don't know how much more time you can spend on it, but that's my respectful submission and guidance.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I will make my decision after we've had our break. I will probably reserve the reasons until tomorrow or a day later, but I'll make my decision today so that everyone knows what the position is. All right. Thank you very much. Can we have the next witness, Mr. Donovan, please?
Mr. Donovan. Mr. Antonio Donovan and Mr. Bisessa would do the summary.
See Mr. Hussain Shah's hand up. Can I help you?
Sorry, Chair. I didn't want to interrupt my friend, but there was one slight mischaracterization of my submissions by him. I did not merely rely on sub-rule 6. I relied on the mandate at 4A12 and 4B4
yes.
in making my submission.
No, I know you did. I have a note of it.
Yeah.
That's fine.
I just wanted that clarification. Thank you.
I took careful note of what you submitted, Mr. Hussain Shah. Thank you.
Grateful, Chair.
Right, Mr. Donovan, please. Just stand for a moment, would you, Mr. Donovan? Yes, that's right.
I
State your name, please.
Antonio Donovan,
Solemnly swear
that the evidence
I shall give
to this commission
in this case
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
Yes, thank you for coming, Mr. Donovan. I think you were here once before.
No.
Were you not? Right. I know that certainly you asked to be put back to this week rather than last week because you were away. I'm happy to have accommodated you, not least because had you been here, the likelihood is you wouldn't have been called anyway. So I think it's just as well. So thank you for coming. What's going to happen now is this. Mr. Bissessar is going to read a summary of your evidence, all right? So listen carefully to that. If you agree that it's correct, you'll tell him so, and then Mr. Maharaj will have some questions for you. But before that happens, so between your summary and Mr. Maharaj asking you questions, we're going to take our normal morning break, 15 minutes or so. I know we had a short break, but that was for different reasons. All right, so we're going to do that. And then we'll resume again after that break, all right?
That's acceptable.
What I would like to think we might be able to achieve is to conclude your evidence, if we can, before the luncheon adjournment, even if it means eating into it for a little bit, all right? Let's see where we go anyway. All right, thank you very much. Mr. Bissessar.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Antonio Donowa was interviewed by the legal team to the Commission, and his witness statement dated 31st October 2022 is at witness bundle 2785. Chairman, rather than summarizing, it's a fairly short statement. I will actually read the content.
Yes, please, but can you just remind me again, please, the page number?
2785.
Volume?
4. That's volume 4 of the witness bundle. I, Antonio Donowa of Cascade, Port of Spain, say as follows. I am an executive director at Offshore Technologies Solutions Limited, OTSL, with responsibility for its subsea services, including all diving and remotely operated vehicle ROV services. OTSL, which began to trade in May 2005, now operates from Sealots, Port of Spain, and its principal business is marine construction and diving. Before the COVID-19 pandemic, OTSL had about 60 permanent staff. OTSL does not presently have any contractual arrangements with Paria other than as a registered contractor. By a letter dated 20th August 2022, I provided a brief statement to the Commission in relation to the events which occurred on 25th February 2022. I now wish to amplify what I said in that letter, a copy of which is attached as AD1. On that afternoon, meaning 25th February 2022, I received a telephone call from someone at Heritage asking whether OTSL had any divers working at Heritage. I cannot recall who called or the exact time, but I did say that OTSL did not have any divers at Heritage and all its divers were accounted for. Later that afternoon, I was contacted by OTSL's Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Ian Bertrand, who told me that Heritage wanted OTSL to provide diving support for missing divers. I told Mr. Bertrand that he should tell Heritage to immediately notify the Coast Guard. Between 5:30 p.m. and 6 p.m., there was a telephone conversation between me and Conan Bedo. I cannot recall if I called him or he called me. Conan was a commercial diver and he was at Paris location. I recommended to Conan that a hyperbaric physician should be in attendance. I asked Conan whether he or Paria required any support, and he told me that they seemed to have had enough there. I told him that OTSL was arranging to come down to Berth 6 on Heritage's instructions. At about 7 p.m., I received a telephone call from George Vieira of EOG, who told me that Paria's Michael Wee was looking for a ROV, and I told him that I would contact Wee. I did, in fact, contact Michael Wee almost immediately after the call and described the appropriate equipment to go into the pipeline to look for the survivors. I explained that OTSL's ROV would not be fit for purpose based on the size of the ROV and the diameter of the pipeline. I also suggested to Wee that he call Anthony Vieira of Hummingbird Safety Systems Limited, HSSL, to provide them with its compact crawler system, as it would reach further than OTSL's ROV, which would have buoyancy issues, and stir up debris in the pipeline, which would affect visibility. I subsequently telephoned and spoke to Anthony Vieira of HSSL, who confirmed that he had in fact spoken to Michael Wee. Later that night, Michael Wee telephoned me. He told me that he wanted me to speak to his incident team, and I agreed for him to put me on speakerphone. I was introduced to his team, but I cannot recall them now. They asked me what could have happened to the divers, and I believe what I said was that they encountered a Delta P incident. They did not appear to understand what a Delta P incident was, so I explained it. And in fact, after my explanation, I sent a video to Michael Wee showing a crab being sucked into a pipeline because of a Delta P incident, and another giving a detailed scientific explanation. I also explained in the telephone call that Delta P means that extreme volumes of water were forced upon you like being waterboarded, but with much larger volumes. I recall asking whether the pipeline was dry, meaning no liquid, and that someone from the incident team said that it was dry. I then said that this meant that the pipeline was under a pressure of approximately 2 atmospheres. One of the incident team members said, no, it is only 7 psi, but I explained that it was 7 psi at ambient, meaning at the surface, but not at minus 40 or 50 feet where the divers were. My teleconference lasted about 10 to 15 minutes, and I asked Michael Wee to call me if he needed more information. I did not speak to Michael Wee or anyone at Paria after this teleconference. A few days later, before the retrieval of the bodies, I was asked by OTSL's CEO, Mr. Bertrand, to join a telephone conversation he was having with Heritage. I did join, although I do not recall the exact date. It was me, Mr. Bertrand, and Mr. O.C. Fleming, Heritage's HSE lead, and several others whose names I do not recall. The purpose of the call was to discuss the possibility of doing a penetration dive into the pipeline to search for survivors. I advised of the safety issues as there was no way to confirm that the pipeline was totally equalized and flooded and free of the possibility of a Delta P event. I also discouraged the idea of drilling holes into the pipeline to search for the divers. This was Heritage's idea, and I also discouraged the idea of cutting the pipeline, as drilling holes and cutting the pipeline would not confirm that the pipeline was totally equalized and flooded and free of the possibility of a Delta P incident. The meeting ended and Heritage said it would get back to OTSL. They never got back to me, and I do not know whether they communicated with OTSL. I was a member of the Trinidad and Tobago Bureau of Standards Specification Committee for its revision of the 1997 Standard for Commercial Diving and Commercial Diving Training. This was in 2007 or so, for about a year. I made several contributions, and the committee devised a draft voluntary standard which, in my view, was consistent with international best practice that would serve the national interest. I recall that the draft standard did get to the public comment stage, but it was never implemented. Mr. Donovan certifies that the facts stated in his witness statement are true and correct to the best of his knowledge, information, and belief. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, thank you very much. What we'll do then is to take our short break now. Maharaj, I'll consider the submissions that have been made. I'll come back at 10 past 12 and make my ruling. As I say, I'll probably reserve reasons, but I'll do that at 10 past 12, please. So can you take a break now? I know you've been waiting all morning. I'm sorry about that. But the reassurance is that now you've been called, you will be finished, all right?
All right.
So we'll come back at 10 past 12, please. So take a break, and we'll see everyone then. Thank you.
All rise.